And now, let us prepare for meditation.
Surely the presence of love is in this place. I can feel love's mighty power and love's grace. I can hear the rush of angels' wings. I see glory on each face. Surely the presence of love is in this place.
Well, friends, if you have not already done so, I invite you to close your eyes and take a deep and gentle breath, letting it go with an ah or a sigh. Allowing your body to relax and yet remain attentive. It's our desire in this time of meditation that we stay open and receptive to inspiration and intuition, while at the same time not allowing our bodies to be a source of distraction. So I invite you to scan your body to see if there's any place that you're holding any tension or a little tightness. And if you discover such a place, simply say to yourself or to that part, peace, be still. Peace, be still. We want to acknowledge whatever's going on and acknowledge it appropriately and release and let go of any tension or irritation. That may mean even wiggling around a bit in your seat, changing your position, or just mindfully taking another deep and gentle breath. And as we engage this process more fully, if your eyes are closed, I invite you to just simply acknowledge whatever degree of luminescence you may be noticing. Maybe everything seems pitch black, or maybe behind your closed eyes you are acknowledging or noticing some form of translucence. There's simply nothing to do about it. We just notice it and let it go. And the same thing, if there's any sort of a distraction in your body, an ache or pain, just simply acknowledge, peace, be still. Take a breath and let it go. And you may be aware of sounds from the room or in our sacred circle. That's fine. We just acknowledge them as sounds. Life makes noise. We just acknowledge it and not attach. You may become aware of various thoughts that pop up, totally unexpected. And sometimes these thoughts are of this moment or what we just heard in these wonderful announcements, or sometimes they're related to something 10 years ago or something that might happen later today. Whatever the case, we simply acknowledge thoughts and let them go. Rest assured, if it's an important thing to think about, it'll still be there after our time of meditation. They're just thoughts. They come and they go. And the same thing with feelings. We sometimes say feelings rather, are thoughts that are not yet speech ripe. Not only are we human beings thinking beings, we are feeling beings. And so, regardless of the feeling, simply say feeling to yourself and let it go. There's ample time to dive into those things after our time of silence. And so we take another deep and gentle breath, and bringing our present moment awareness to the forefront of our minds, we enter into a time of silence for just a few minutes, where we rest and renew in the sacred container that we have created together. And friends, I invite you to take another deep and gentle breath and let it go with an ah or a sigh. You may wish to begin to wiggle your fingers or toes, and when you're ready to fully engage, open your eyes so that way you might see the brightness of you shining through. Peace be with you, and namaste. Thank you, Dr. Will. That was absolutely beautiful. So those of you who are joining us may not know that Dr. Will and I met many, many, many years ago. But since we're timeless, it seems like yesterday. So it is just a pleasure to not only be with Unity of Davis, but to be with Dr. Will Tuttle as well. So this is a red letter day for me, and it's a pleasure to be back. So what I'd like to talk about today is something that we don't often discuss in Unity churches and centers, but it's a topic that for some people literally goes bone deep. And that topic is, you guessed it, titanium. So what's so special about titanium that it would warrant being referenced in a Sunday Unity church service? Well, let's think about it for a moment. I don't know how much you all know about the chemistry of titanium, but it is highly resistant to chemical attack, meaning it's a very resilient metal and has the highest strength to weight ratio of any metal. So for those purposes, it's used in aircraft and spacecraft and missiles because of its low density and ability to withstand extremes of temperature. But for us as normal people, let me rephrase that, average folks, titanium is used in golf clubs, laptops, bicycles, crutches, artificial joints, and dental implants. So let's hear it for titanium. A round of applause for titanium. So I'm curious, you can just raise your hands if you want. How many of you are familiar with the song Titanium written by Sia and David Guetta? Anybody listen to dance house music, or is that just me? Okay, I haven't grown up. So, and I steadfastly refuse. So this is a song that, well, look it up. So I encourage you to look it up. It's written by, like I said, Australian singer-songwriter Sia, S-I-A, and French DJ David Guetta. So this pop song has a real catchy tune, but it also has very inspiring lyrics. And the song talks about finding inner strength even when the world seems too dark and challenging. And it's a great reminder for people to stand up for themselves and not let anyone else belittle them. So how do we do this? I mean, we sometimes hear these great song lyrics and we get these great talks. I'm interested in nuts and bolts practical spirituality that I can use, that you can use, that we all can use to really co-create with God the lives that we truly desire to have. So, ironically, many folks spend their lives wanting to be happy and trying to do everything we can to create happy lives. But the paradox is that trying to make ourselves happy won't often work. But what will work, what will add richness and fullness to our lives is by endeavoring to create meaningful lives. So I'll tell you what I got my inspiration from today. So this past summer, I had the occasion to visit the Chautauqua Institute in upstate New York. Anybody familiar with Chautauqua Institute in New York or the Chautauqua programs? Yeah, it's really this amazing experience of inspiration and creativity. And so I've been invited twice by Unity of Chautauqua to go up to be the Unity Minister in Residence. It's a great time on Lake Chautauqua. And one of the speakers this year was a woman named Emily Esfahani Smith. And she was a speaker, and she talked about her book, The Power of Meaning, Finding Fulfillment in a World Obsessed with Happiness. Now, I'm not saying don't try to be happy. That's laudable, and everybody wants to be happy. Why not? But she really highlighted that how we deal with the world of suffering and all the angst and stuff we read about is to avail ourselves by to stay open to the activity of grace and meaning in our world. It was a powerful, powerful presentation. And then I found out that she lives in Washington, D.C., just a hop, skip, and a jump from where I am here in Northern Virginia. So I called her agent and I said, hey, I'd like to have her come out and be a guest speaker at my church. And he said, and I said, so what's that going to cost? You know, bottom line, we got to cover our bases here, right? And he looked at me with a perfect straight face on the Zoom call and said, $10,000. And I burst out laughing, and I realized, oh, that was kind of rude because he was actually serious. And I thought, man, I'm in the wrong game. So anyway, suffice to say, she didn't come to Unity of Fairfax, but if I see her on the street, I'll probably buy her a cup of coffee because it was just a really powerful presentation. So her thesis was that seeking to always be happy is not realistic because life is going to happen. Bad things are going to happen to good people. Bad things are going to happen to bad people. Good things are going to happen to bad people, and good things are going to happen to good people. And it reminded me of that verse in Matthew from the Sermon on the Mount, where ascribed to Jesus, where he says, "For he makes the sun on the rise and the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and unrighteous." So, in other words, accidents and diagnoses and war and violence and flight cancellations and traffic jams are just going to happen. And it's naturally sad to feel, it's natural, and it's perfectly natural to feel sad and angry and resentful because of all of that sort of stuff. So it makes us realize that happiness is surface, but meaning is deep. Now, there's huge positive good in the world. So please don't come away thinking, oh gosh, he used to be such a nice, optimistic guy, and now what happened? He fell down a rabbit hole. No, there's wonderful good out there in the world and wonderful good in here. And we also have to acknowledge if we want to be whole and healthy people, so is loneliness and poor mental health and all these other things. It may seem that if we're always trying to be happy, then something always comes along to prevent that from happening. It reminds me of Hee Haw. Y'all remember Hee Haw? If it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. Yeah, Hee Haw. But that's not really how it is either. You know, we have stuff happens here on the physical plane of life. So all that being said, the Bible also gives us any number of powerful examples of people finding the best in a situation. So think about the story of Joseph in the Hebrew Scriptures. Genesis chapter 50, verse 20 sums it up. So just quick recap. He was his father's favorite. The brothers got jealous, sold him into slavery, and he had a horrible experience, but ultimately became the chief assistant to Pharaoh and the number 2 man in Egypt. So when he's pondering all that happened in his life, he says, even though you intended to do me harm, God intended it for good in order to preserve a numerous people as he is doing today. So even though something that started out as a horrendous situation happened, it still had great meaning. Now, I suppose he was probably very happy about that in the long run, but the process of getting to his position wasn't really a good time. So if he thought the purpose was to be happy in life, he may not have survived his experience. But he found meaning in all of it by using his gift of dream interpretation, and it made all the difference in the world. So if you want to read up on the story, it's Genesis chapters 37 to 50. So what do we mean? You get it? Talking about meaningful? By the term meaningful. Meaningful means connecting and contributing to something beyond oneself. Let me repeat that. Connecting and contributing to something beyond oneself. So this happens when we lean into 4 of the different themes that Dr. Estefany Smith talked about. And they're really kind of cool because they align so much of what we talk about and teach in Unity. Belonging, purpose, transcendence, and storytelling. Let's talk about belonging for a minute. Belonging simply is being in a relationship in which you are valued intrinsically. And intrinsically means your participation is essential. And so it's the other person in the relationship or the other people in the relationship. We can choose to cultivate this belonging by becoming willing to listen to each other, to witness one another's lives without trying to fix them, by sharing our vulnerabilities, and simply in order to be willing to belong. It's a lot like we talk about our prayer chaplains. So thank you, prayer chaplains, for your work. When we talk about safe space, this safe space of prayer is non-judgmental. It's welcoming and it's curious. How can I serve you today? Because I see in you a beloved reflection of the creative magnificence that God is. Belonging. It's just like how we work to maintain a sense of belonging in the post-COVID, well, during COVID and the post-COVID era, using our online technologies to connect as well as gathering in person, because we value belonging as an intrinsic element of creating meaning and purpose. Well, let's talk about purpose, the second value, for a moment. Purpose is a goal or a value that orients your life and drives you into the future. Your life purpose can come from very ordinary, everyday experiences as well as the great big ones. And it's generally in adolescence and young adulthood that this emerges. That might be our purpose, might be related to a special gift or talent we have, like Dr. Will and his music. It could be like a commitment to the environment and the things we do to make the world a healthier place. It might be a commitment to service, or it might be a commitment to whatever our art form is. The thing about purpose is one's purpose emerges from within you. It's not a side sign from outside, whether from your family or the culture. And it can emerge from a supportive environment where your gifts and talents are naturally nurtured. It can also emerge from hitting rock bottom, where you just got to figure some stuff out. Who am I really, so that I can get out from this bottom of the barrel experience? Your purpose is your soul's longing to express the true essence of you. But as Thoreau said, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation because they're not living the fullness of their authenticity, which is especially hard to do if your family, your church, your culture, whoever has assigned you a role that isn't your natural role or way of being. So part of finding meaning in our lives is to identify what is my purpose or purposes. I think we all have more than one that allow me to be a conduit of spirit in the world. All right, the third point, transcendence. This is a word that we like in Unity a lot. We like our trans words, transformation, transcendence, you know it. So transcendence are these moments of feeling lifted and connected to something much bigger than oneself, a sense of self-loss and yet connectedness at the same time. These are among some of the most meaningful experiences of life. Our various spiritual practices from all different traditions can create the opening for us to have these experiences on a regular basis. But so can doing simple everyday things when we just give ourselves over to single focus of whatever it is we're doing. Could even be housework. It could be sitting out in the woods, sitting at the beach, watching the stars. It's just that wonderful experience of that paradox of self-loss. Like, I'm not even aware of myself, and yet I know I'm connected to all things all the time. We love these experiences, and they can happen even randomly. And when they do, simply acknowledge this is happening. Just be in it. And then the fourth element of this capacity to create a meaningful life, to go from mean to meaningful, storytelling. I mean, when I first heard this, I thought, what? Storytelling? Oh my goodness. But what she means in this context is the story you tell yourself about how you came to become you. It's the story of your life. Story can provide a wonderful meaning-making opportunity. And you can just ask yourself, is the story you are consistently telling yourself one that is holding you back? It's a story of loss, lack, limitation, fear? Or is your story primarily about moving forward, about growth, about transformation. We have to be careful in unity and new thought because quite often we will say one thing and yet our inner dialogue is saying something else. Not a criticism. I'm talking primarily to the guy in the mirror about bringing myself into alignment. What is the story we're telling ourselves? And let me give you a break. So if you notice some negatives, remember that in our evolutionary development, humans have what's called a negativity bias. It's a historical survival mechanism, meaning if you hear a noise and you're outside at night, oh my goodness, what's the noise? Is it going to get me? Well, that's a real good question to ask because it might be coming to get you. But more often than not in our lives, we don't have to worry about that so much, but we still have that negativity bias. So as soon as we can recognize what we're thinking, then we can decide, is this helpful or not helpful? We don't like to say the right or wrong. This is simply helpful or not helpful. So if we realize our story we're telling ourselves has a tremendous negativity bias, then realize we all have the capacity and the wherewithal to change it. To ask ourselves this other question, how can what is before me be for me? A simple question. Or how can what is before us be for us? That puts a real positive spin on the story we are writing and the story we are telling and retelling. You know, quite often we don't even realize that our stories are shaped by our culture. And sometimes we can be a part of multiple cultures. I'm not talking about different global communities, but just groups of people, different consciousnesses. And sometimes they have more of a positive bias, like we have in Unity, and there are others that have more of a negative bias. So let's just compare two, like a gang, a street gang that has a kind of a negative bias, or a service organization has a positive bias. Those biases of the groups in which we find ourselves help to shape the story we are telling ourselves about ourselves. So we always have the opportunity to tell ourselves a redemptive story with better outcomes. May not happen overnight, but it will happen nonetheless. So as we think about this, I want to share with you a little bit of the context of the Chautauqua experience with the week I was there this summer. The theme of the week was, can the center hold? A question for our moment. And what the author posited was that political extremism fills a need for meaning, and its dogmatism mirrors fundamentalism. It meets a need for belonging, but in a short-sighted way. It does not assuage the anxiety generated by information overload. So basically what she's saying is, let us be aware that just as we as individuals in our setting are seeking to find meaningful lives and create purpose in our lives, that happens for everybody else. And if we perceive a problem out there somewhere, let us realize and be compassionate and understand that folks are simply trying to assuage anxieties in their lives. Now, fortunately for us, our New Thought teachings help us avoid some of that, not all of it, but help us to frame our world in a very positive context. And by addressing how we make meaning in our lives will help us to create meaningful lives. And paradoxically, even though we weren't looking necessarily to be happy, don't be surprised if happiness is a byproduct. So, how do we do this? We ask ourselves, where do I belong? Where is the group and what is the setting where I feel vulnerable and where others, well, I'll share with me their vulnerabilities. That helps us to create meaning. Second, what purpose or purposes am I being called to? And don't worry if you don't feel like you've figured it out just yet. You have all the time in the world to do this. Look for the things that flow for you. Look for the things that give you a sense of satisfaction. Chances are your purpose is somewhere in there. Number 3, In what settings do you experience transcendence? Well, naturally, that will include any gathering at Unity of Davis, but there are others as well. Allow those moments and those times to become a part of your meaning-making experience. And then lastly, ask yourself very mindfully, what is the story of my life I am telling me? And if you're not satisfied with that particular story, change it. You are the author. You have the power. After all, you are titanium, the strongest, most powerful element that we have. And plus, it might help you improve your golf game. Peace be with you. Namaste.